Hi everybody, and welcome to this very brief and sketchy overview of the Russian Revolution. I just want to kind of talk you through some of the main points so you can get a framework for what happened during this time. We're talking, roughly the early 1900s to the start of World War II. So about 45 years. So Russia's a huge country, as you know. And at the time, the Tsar, who was called Tsar Nicholas II, wanted even more land. In fact, he wanted South Korea, so they would have another port. So he decides to go to war with Japan. This is a picture of Tsar Nicholas II. He says, you know what, it's a great idea. We're just going to take South Korea. So the Russians go to war with Japan, thinking we're just going to take over Korea. It's going to be really easy. Well, it ends up not being easy. In fact, Japan wins handily, and the Russian people are humiliated, they're defeated, and they're starving because the war has taken a huge toll on the Russian people. So the people are pretty upset about this, and they said, you know what, that was a stupid move. We're starving. We don't have any food anymore. We are being worked so hard. We went to war for you, and we're tired of it. We're going to go to Petrograd, which is now St. Petersburg, and we're going to give you a list of grievances. So they go to the palace called the Winter Palace in Petrograd, and they say, here's our list of grievances. Kind of sounds familiar, like the American Revolution. Well, the Tsar wasn't there. He was tending to his son Alexei in Moscow because Alexei had hemophilia, so he's kind of a sickly child. So he wasn't there at the time. The person who was there at the time decided, you guys are complaining? Well, I think we're just going to shoot you. So they shot as many people as they could, and that is called Bloody Sunday, which happened in 1905. So even though the Tsar wasn't there, he was blamed for it. So, and you can see, Moscow and Petrograd are not too far away from each other, but, it's a big country and news took a long time to travel. So it did, and people were not happy with the family, the royal family. And here is the Tsar with his children. In fact, the wife of Nicholas II was hanging out with this really creepy dude called Rasputin, and he would sort of tell her things, and then she'd say, "Oh, okay, I'm supposed to do this," and people didn't like him. They thought it was creepy, and so the whole family was getting to be not very highly thought of. Well, World War I comes around, and Russia goes into war against the Germans, and people are fighting against the Germans, and again, it leaves the country just destitute. They're completely poor, and a lot of people die in this war. And now they're thinking, okay, enough's enough. No more royal family. We're going to stage a revolution, and we're going to force the Tsar to abdicate because we're tired of this. All these middle-class people, we're going to rise up and revolt. So they do, and they form this kind of temporary government. The temporary government lasts for a while, but they're not really effective. Whoops. And so they have a kind of a second revolution, and that second revolution is called the October Revolution, and that basically puts one party in charge, and that party is called the Bolsheviks. And the Bolsheviks, it's kind of like the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. These were called the Bolsheviks, and their leader was Lenin. And he was a very strong leader. He was a follower of Karl Marx, who was a philosopher. And Karl Marx said the best form of economic system, government system, is communism. And communism, very, very loosely explained, is where people share the wealth. Instead of the czars having all the money and the power, the people should all share it equally. If we're all working together, let's just make sure everyone is fed. That's sort of a very simplistic view. And Lenin said, he preached this to the people. He said, I am going to make sure that we are communists, that we are no longer living under the Tsar. We are going to work together so that everybody is fed, everybody has land, and we're going to have peace. We're not going to have any more of these wars anymore. And the people loved it. They were like, oh, this is great. He's going to be wonderful. And we don't want to go to war. And we don't want to starve anymore. And we don't want all our money going toward the Tsar. So Lenin said, you know what? I don't want any member of the Tsar's family to live. So he sent people to go and shoot them. And that's what happened to the Tsar's family. He didn't want any heirs, even though Alexei was really weak and not necessarily probably could have been a leader. He says, I kill the children, kill him, kill his wife. It was just brutal. Now, some people say one of the daughters survived, but that's a different story. So now Lenin doesn't have any enemies, and he starts ruling Russia. Now, there are some people who, and Lenin is in charge of the Red Army. That's what the Red Army takes control of the government. But the White Army, there's still a lot of people who say, you know what, the Tsar wasn't that bad. We kind of like the way things are. We don't want all these revolutionary ideas. So the White Army fights against the Red Army, and the Red Army are the revolutionaries. Well, the revolutionaries win. Lenin wins. The White Army is defeated, and no longer will there be czars in Russia. From now on, they're a communist country. Well, Lenin dies. I think he has a heart attack. And then they're looking for somebody to be the leader after him. So this is Leon Trotsky. He was one of the people who was in the Red Army, very active in the Bolsheviks. He was, really good speaker. And another person was Joseph Stalin, also very closely associated with Lenin. So these two people vie for power, and they want to become the leader. Well, Stalin wins, and he says, Trotsky, he's terrible, he's awful, he's the reason for all your problems. Let's get Trotsky out. So Trotsky leaves the country. I mean, he's so worried about his life, he has to leave the country. And Stalin starts this wave of propaganda, like, okay, you know what? Life is going to be good. We no longer have the czars. Unfortunately, Lenin is dead, but I'm here. I'm going to be the father of the people. We are going to modernize our country. We are going to work together. I have a 5-year plan. It's all going to work out beautifully. We're going to have factories. We're going to be a superpower. And life as we know it will be fabulous. So people were thinking, fantastic, this is great. We love Stalin. Boy, he must be a really nice guy. He holds up babies. Well, all of this propaganda wasn't really true. In fact, Stalin was a very vicious dictator. He forced people to work 7 days a week, 11 hours. If they weren't producing enough, he'd say, work more, work harder. You've got to do more. You've got to work harder. And he would just be very vicious against any opponents. And people, again, they went back to like, well, we're still starving. We're not eating very much. And if we disagree with you, we're going to be shot. It was really an oppressive, scary place to be when Stalin was in charge. And Stalin would just say, work harder, work harder. And if you disagree with me, you're going to be killed. So a lot of people died during Stalin's rule. We're not exactly sure how many died under his rule, but most people tend to agree that it was about 20 million. So not a good situation. In fact, he kept blaming Trotsky. When people would complain, he'd say, you know why you don't have any food anymore? It's Trotsky. He's spoiling everything. And people believe that because Stalin was a very, very persuasive speaker. So Stalin was even worried about Trotsky coming back, so he sent a death squad over, oops, there's the bell, over to where Trotsky lives, and they killed him. So there would be nobody who could take over Stalin's power. Stalin goes into war against Germany, so thing that he said that was going to happen, there's no more peace, people are starving, nobody, the government holds property over all the land, And it's a pretty dark situation for all of the people. So that's a really brief history, fast done, fastly completed, but I hope you get an idea of a general timeline of how these different leaders tried to pull Russia out of poverty and help their country, but it all seemed to turn pretty bad.